The answer is it had an extremely influential role. I've already mentioned the growth of nationalism and national ideas. Poets often wanted to write new poetry that matched these new ideals that emerged in the aftermath of this nationalist moment. Frequently we find the modernist poets positioning themselves in a decolonial mode, anti-colonial mode, trying to resist European colonial projects. And then in the aftermath of the independence movements, revolutions, things like that throughout the first half and into the second half of the 20th century, we then see nationalist ideas playing out here as well. But the interesting thing, I think, with the modernists is, for the most part, they are, like T.S. Eliot, highly pessimistic about the possibilities of what will come after nationalism. For instance, you see a lot of malaise and despair enter into these poetic contexts after the failure of populist movements, let's say, just to simplify them. They're not all necessarily communist, but populist. Iran, 1953, you have this coup d'etat against Mohammad Mossadegh, a popularly elected prime minister who nationalizes the Iranian oil industry. But there's a counter-revolutionary movement that succeeds, led by supporters of the Shah. And in the aftermath of this, the modernist poets, many of whom were communists or affiliated with the left, fall into this deep moment of introspection. And the poetry becomes not necessarily less political, but less explicitly political, more complicated. And it's more difficult to relate it directly to, say, more nationalist poetry that we would find from an earlier period. Find the same thing in Iraq with a poet like Badr Shakr Sayyab. Starts out as a communist. He's writing his first modernist poetry, which happens to be one of the first instances of truly modernist poetry in Arabic, from 1947. He's a communist during this period, so it's related to his politics because it's liberatory in some way, right? We have a monarchy in power that's backed by the British in Iraq. But over time, Sayyab becomes disillusioned with communism and leftist movements in general. Why? Because he spent some time in Iran, and he was actually there when the coup happens in 1953. And he sees the Tudeh party, the party of the masses, that is the Iranian Communist Party, not respond to the coup against Mossadegh. And he throws up his hands and says, I'm done with communism, and he becomes a proto-Ba'athist. And the audience might be familiar with the word Ba'ath because that's the political party that Saddam Hussein comes from. So we have someone who was a major supporter of these progressive, liberatory, communist, leftist positions. We see that in his poetry in many ways, who then changes into an Iraqi nationalist who is also a pan-Arabist in some ways as well. There's another big term for us. Pan-Arabism is the idea that the Arabs are one nation, so it's trying to create a broader nation that's not just defined by, say, being Iraqi or Egyptian or Syrian. And in fact, around the same time, there was a movement to unite all these countries in the United Arab Republic. It didn't last very long at all. These things are all really interesting to me because the political and social and economic context plays into the poetry quite a bit, and the poetry is reacting to it. But at a certain point, we can no longer say that there are these direct relationships because the political malaise and the fact of failure leads to a more introspective type of modernism.